Welcome back to Hot Takes, the news show for busy people who love motorcycles. And today we're talking MotoGP rule changes for 2027.
You can't change the rules just because you don't like how I'm doing it.
It's exciting. Let's dig into it and see what's up. So, first of all, why make a change? Why change the rules at all? Well, the truth is that the racing isn't as exciting as it could be, and their goal is to make it closer and more exciting. But you might think, hey, we've had some great battles. Yeah, we have had some great battles between Bagnaia and Marquez last weekend. We see Acosta up there. We see Binder. We see all these guys like Martin blisteringly fast. But one thing you notice is, none of those guys are on Japanese bikes. So is it just a Japanese bike problem? Well, actually it's not. All the riders are complaining that it's harder and harder to overtake in MotoGP. So, why is that? Aerodynamics and ride height devices changed racing drastically in the last few years. Aerodynamics is simply downforce pushing down on the front and sometimes the back of the motorcycle, increasing grip, increasing stability. Ride height devices are a little more complicated. When a bike comes out of a turn, it wants to wheelie. That's your limiting acceleration factor. If you lower the bike, it won't go around corners well. So, very simply, you have the best of both worlds. As you're coming out of the turn, you lower the bike. It lowers the center of gravity, doesn't want to wheelie, puts the power down, and beats the other guys down the straight. When you get to the end of the straight, you raise the bike back up again so it can go through a turn.
So you kind of get to have your cake and eat it too.
Kind of, yeah.
Genius device, right? Well, they're outlawing them. Why? Because apparently they're expensive, difficult to develop, and give some teams a bigger advantage than others. So they're trying to cut the cost and even things up a bit. But the real issue with overtaking has to do with aerodynamics. So what are they doing about that? Well, they're making the bike narrower at the front from 600 millimeters to 550. The nose is shorter by 50 millimeters. And in the rear of the bike, they can only change it one time during the year. So in recent times, the rear of the bike has had basically no rules. And teams have taken advantage of this to spend a lot of time in experimentation and R&D and development. And it's been expensive. So they want to keep the costs down and control that. So is this going to make racing closer? Maybe. By limiting the frontal area, you're limiting the downforce, and the downforce, having less downforce means it's not as big a deal. So the real issue is when it's the same in Formula One, when the rider behind gets close to the rider in front, he gets into the draft, into the dirty air, and then his downforce stops working. And so when he goes to go into the turn, he has less grip than the vehicle in front, and making it harder to close the distance and harder to overtake. To have everything work correctly, you have to stay back, making it difficult to overtake. You can't overtake from way back. So that's why the racing is less exciting. So by lowering the amount of downforce that is being affected, it will have some effect. But when I read the rules, it doesn't really seem like they're doing much about the dirty air behind. The rules that they released currently don't really change the air, the dirty air that's behind. It just limits the amount of times that they can redesign the rear. If they come out with more information about these rules, I'll let you know. The next thing has crosshairs directly at Ducati, and that is GPS data. So Ducati has a big advantage in MotoGP because they have so many bikes on the grid that gives them way more data. So they're forcing everybody to release GPS data, and you can look at your competitors' GPS data after a race or after a session. This will allow lower teams to see what their competitors are doing and try and close that gap to the front. And this is a good thing. This will make racing more exciting. The engines will be limited to 850cc, and they are not changing the stroke to save cost. So the crankcase can basically stay the same. They're taking the bore from 81 millimeters down to 75. And this will decrease top speeds on the straight. Horsepower is always a pretty big deal in racing. No matter if you're racing 300cc bikes or 1000cc bikes, horsepower is a big deal. So this isn't going to drastically change the role of horsepower, but it will reduce it a little and put more pressure on the corners and what's happening going into and through turns. MotoGP is going to 100% biofuel. Now, we can't say this is a surprise. They've been 40% biofuel up to this point, and they're going to 100%. And this is where Formula One went. And the idea is that the most premier racing leagues in the world should be leading the way in sustainability. Well, that's cool and everything, except for the carbon footprint that these teams have when they move from country to country to country all year long. The amount of carbon that they're releasing into the air from flying their planes really seems just massive compared to this biofuel. So to me, it seems a little bit like virtue signaling more than actual difference in the environment.
It's a signal of my world-class virtue. You know I'm a better person than you before I even open my mouth to tell you. This is a lot.
But maybe you have a different opinion. What do you think about the 2027 changes to MotoGP? Do you think they're going to be good? Do you think they're going to make exciting racing? Well, we're going to find out. And let us know what you think in the comments. See you next time on Hot Takes.